welcome back to the Cult for More podcast. I'm your host, Cassandra Perez, and this is episode 7, and it's also the start of a new year. So happy new year. I'm hoping that your year started off well, and I just pray that 2024 is a year where you all walk in your God-given purpose, use all the gifts and talents that you have, and that you actually fulfill the New Year's resolution that you set out for yourself. I encourage you guys to write down goals that are achievable for the new year so that you don't disappoint yourself when you reflect back on next year. So with our theme of entering the new year, I wanted to talk about necessary endings that need to take place in order for us to enter the new seasons of our life and how to enter them well. And we all have doors that we need to close properly in order to not bring the old into the new. And so I thought this would be a great topic to touch on this new year. It's a good topic, but it's also a difficult one because often endings are associated with pain, with hurt. They can have a lot of fear behind them, which is why sometimes we can prolong things in our life that should have ended a long time ago. And I know I've definitely been a victim of that, and I've learned the hard way that I probably should have let go of certain behaviors, people, relationships in the past that I was holding on to for too long. And so before I really go into this topic, I want to start off and acknowledge 2 truths that are associated with endings and just changing seasons of our life. And the first truth is that we have to be friends with reality. And what do I mean by that? It means that we have to accept that life cycles and seasons are a part of life. And if you find yourself having an extremely hard time with endings and maybe even beginnings, you might be in denial of reality. And that's not to invalidate the hardships that come with new seasons, but denial is defined as the action of declaring something to be untrue. And denial can also prolong grief because we are not able to step into the healing that is needed. Although denial can be our body's natural defense mechanism, saying that, whoa, there's way too much going on, too much is changing all at once, which is why sometimes we can go into this denial mode. And I often think about even seasons changing, how our body reacts. I know I get super sick whenever it's winter and it's changing into springtime. So even our bodies get affected by it, our physical bodies. So imagine then the internal turmoil that can happen within us, our emotional health, our mental health, and what that goes through whenever we change seasons or when doors close unexpectedly or when new doors open. So endings can be difficult, but they are crucial. A lot of us may have finally ended relationships or friendships that were unhealthy, but then doubts begin to creep back in and haunt us and tell us that we failed or that we gave up too soon. But sometimes we have to kill off things that we were once invested in and uproot what we previously nurtured. And this is just a requirement for living and for thriving, for your professional life and for your personal life. Endings are a necessity and they are a part of life. I want to go over some reasons why we tend to avoid endings. And a common question that I find myself asking is this fixable? So that's why I don't end things oftentimes, because I'm asking myself, well, can I still fix this? Is this still something that I can work on? And many of us hold on to the hope that things can work itself out if we just hold on a little bit longer. But one key thing to look out for is if the relationship or business, whatever it might be, we have to evaluate if holding on will create more destruction over harmony. And repairs and ruptures are a normal part of relationships, but sometimes we hold on to things that God is asking us to let go, and sometimes we're holding on to things that God wants to fix in his own way, and it doesn't align with the way that we had planned things out. I know that this has happened to me so many times in my life where I was holding on to relationships with friendships that I wanted to fix so badly, but God had different plans for them. He had different plans for me, and he was asking me that I don't need to be a savior for people, which is why I had to eventually let go and close doors of relationships that I wanted to keep. And this is just because they may no longer serve a purpose, and this is not a reflection on the person themselves, on the business itself, or anything, whatever it might be. It's not really a reflection of the value within that other person. So I also don't want to encourage that. I don't want to encourage anyone to look at someone that we need to let go of as someone that's worthless. It might just be that they're no longer serving a fruitful purpose in our life. And we have to ask ourselves if this is going to help us grow and propel us forward, whatever it might be that we're holding on to. Is it really something that is pouring into us or just depleting us? And what better way to know if the situation is fixable than by praying about it? I love this psalm. It's found in the book of Psalms, chapter 55, verse 22. And it says, "Cast your burden on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never permit the righteous to be moved." So how encouraging is that? If we give him this burden, whatever thing that we are worried about, that we don't know what to do, he will sustain us and not allow us to be moved by everything else that is being shaken. And God is a God of peace, but this doesn't mean that his answers are always going to be the easiest. Peace doesn't equal easy. Peace means freedom from disturbance or tranquility. You have this supernatural feeling, knowing that everything is going to be okay. And so I never want to confuse anyone into thinking that closing doors equals that you're going to get all these butterflies and happiness and warm feelings if it's from God. No, sometimes he does call us to close doors and we'll still feel a little bit hurt by it, or it's not something that we wanted to do. That's definitely a reality of closing doors that even God leads us to, is that it's not always going to be something that's going to be full of a lot of happiness. Another reason that we often avoid endings as well is because we fear confrontation. This is common behavior that's found in people-pleasing characteristics that I have found over the years, and definitely studying in grad school I have learned. And I think my biggest problem with people-pleasing behaviors is that we have a responsibility and we owe it to ourselves to make decisions that will work out for our own good. We have a responsibility over how we steward the life that we have been given, which is why we shouldn't be catering our life to pleasing others. Honestly, to me, that sounds incredibly tiring and can lead to growing resentful for the people that we are trying so hard to please. So it's not something that you really win at. Like, yes, you might get the approval of others, which is what you're seeking deep down, but at what expense? At your time, at always pushing yourself aside. We shouldn't set a goal to mold our life around what others think of us, because at the end of the day, the only person that we should be living for is God. So again, fear of confrontation is another reason why we are avoiding endings. Another reason why we fear this is also because we can lack a lot of courage. One of the many things that God has transformed in me was taking away my spirit of fear and timidity. If you would have told me years ago that I was going to be doing a podcast, and if you were to tell me that I was going to love public speaking, I would have never believed you, because I was such a chicken. I remember I got like a C in speech. I would always shake. I would actually get nervous just saying here when they would call my name for attendance. I would be thinking of how my tone was going to be, how loud I was going to say. I would overthink so much. So lacking this courage can definitely stop a lot of us from taking action when we need to take action, and can honestly be such a huge block and an obstacle to achieving the things that we need to achieve. And having courage is a skill that a lot of leaders have, and that God will instill in you, and that he wants to give you. Joshua 1:9 says, and I do reference this verse a lot in my podcast, but it's one of my favorites. It says, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." And so breaking down this verse, it's a command that God is giving to us and to his people to be strong and courageous, because at the end of the day, we have nothing to fear, because God will always be with us. He'll always be with you to get up, to get that bravery to end something that needs to end, to not have fear of confrontation, but have the courage to confront and do what you need to do. I observe so many people around me lacking courage to speak up and change their situation. They are actually puppets of their situation instead of dictating how it's going to work out for them. And it's really heartbreaking to witness. And a lot of the times it's due to not having the boldness and the power of God, and knowing that you're a treasure in the eyes of God, and he does not want you to be in a situation that's going to inflict you and cause you harm. In fact, that's what the enemy wants to do. He wants to strip us of all bravery so that we become victims of whatever is going on around us, and so that we never end things that need to end. So to summarize a couple more excuses as to why we avoid necessary endings, these could be because we have a fear of the unknown. That's definitely another powerful one that operates within us. As someone of faith, I can rest well. I can lay my head on the pillow at night full of peace, knowing that whatever door closes, whether I like it or not, God knows best. God knows better. And this is why I do believe people who lack a strong foundation in their faith struggle with a lot of anxiety, because who do you turn to? How are you going to know? What is the stability in your life that you're holding on to? And that's an honest question that I do ask people, because I know that everything, all of my life is in the hands of God, who has ordained everything already, who has laid down all my steps, and who has it at the palm of his hand. So whatever happens, whatever door closes or opens, it's all ordained by God, and I can trust that he has his best interest in me, whether I agree with it at the time or I don't. So this fear of the unknown can definitely be defeated by trusting in the one who does know, which is God. And we can also avoid endings because we are afraid of hurting others, but sometimes that's just unavoidable in the process of changing seasons. And I'm not saying that this is the green card to just do anything without care for the other. If someone's involved in this changing of seasons, always have the best interest, always lead your heart and your decisions with compassion. Sometimes people are not going to like your decision. Just like if you need to leave a toxic job, your boss is not going to like that. But if it's something that's necessary for you, then you have to go ahead and make that decision. Another reason that we hold on to avoid endings is to not have to deal with sadness or the grief that comes with it, because we might not have the proper skills to kind of help us cope and handle these things. So that's definitely a popular one. And lastly, some of us have toxic dependency of holding on to things that have just been held on to for far too long, which can be an obstacle for us. We need to remember that everything in this life is temporary. There's a time for everything. Just read Ecclesiastes 3 and memorize it. There is a time for everything. Nothing is permanent on this life. Unfortunately, the only thing that's permanent is eternal life. And that's the only thing that we can hold on to. There's another verse in the Bible where it says to set your mind on the things above. Why? Because the things on this earth are constantly changing and they're going to return to dust. So if we're dependent on people, especially people, we should never be dependent on someone, because people will fail us. People might leave us. People might betray us. People are unpredictable. Even the best person you can think of can still let you down. Yeah, I could do a whole episode on each and every one of these reasons as to why we avoid endings. These are all just behaviors to reflect on if they resonate with you, and really ask yourself, like, what is stopping me and how can I defeat these? A really good book, which actually inspired my title, is called Necessary Endings by Henry Cloud. He goes way into detail. It's a really easy read. With all of this, I want to highlight now the beauty in ending things, because there's a biblical concept to all of this, and it's called pruning. There are several references in scripture, especially in the New Testament, to farming and farmers, because it's able to really capture the way that we operate. And specifically, I want us all to think about closed doors as God actively pruning in our life. Pruning helps us reach our full potential. The dictionary actually defines pruning as a way to reduce the extent of something by removing the surplus of unwanted parts. And so if people want to reach actual results in life, you have to know how to prune away, because at the end of the day, there's always a time to plant and there's always a time to uproot, but you have to know the standard to what you are pruning toward. Pruning is intentional, forward-looking, measurable, and strategic. It is a process of proactive endings. And some of us can be stuck in a worldview where you don't normalize endings, but we all live in the same universe in which endings are literally built into the way that we operate. So why not learn how to also exit well so that you can embrace whatever is on the other side? And so when I think about the word pruning, I think about a farmer cutting away sick or dead branches, which, if you think about it, it's part of a healthy agricultural system. A farmer has a standard to which he is pruning toward, meaning that he has a vision, and in his head, he's defined what he's shooting for, so then he can prune toward that direction. I'm going to highlight ways that we know how to prune away things in our life. And one of the first ones is when there is a surplus of something in your life. Think about a rose bush. They always produce more buds than the plant can sustain. And if you were to let the rose bush bring every bud into full bloom, they're going to have limited fuel and support to sustain all of the flowers that bloom. So farmers have to prune away the extra ones in order to not divert all the resources to the extra buds. And so that's kind of the same with us. Whatever we are holding on to can cause a great distraction to our purpose. So this can be people, it can be social media, it can be unhealthy thoughts, poor boundaries, and so much more. In 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 23, it says, God paid a high price for you, so don't be enslaved by the world. So I really like this verse because definitely in today's culture, a busy schedule can fool us into thinking it adds value to our life, but truthfully, it can be taking away more and leaving you with less fuel to actually fuel your purpose, your actual purpose that you should be focusing on and solely focusing on. And God doesn't want you to be a slave to anything or make an idol of any worldly things, but to be free and to serve Him with as little distractions as possible, and He will work everything out on your behalf. So therefore, whatever you are being enslaved by, whatever is a surplus in your life that's not actually being fruitful, you need to cut it off and you need to put an end to it. And so let's look at another example of when it's time to end something. So farmers prune sick or dead branches that may or may not make it. After watering properly and using fertilizer, a farmer realizes that some branches just won't make it, and therefore it's better to prune it off. And so I thought that this was a great example to us as to how we should analyze the things around us that are actually running the risk of rotting us away. To ensure that crops will grow, farmers have to protect the harvest from insects that can cause infestation. I actually experienced this firsthand. I came home the other night. I forgot what I was doing, but I came home and the house smelled like vinegar. It was such a bad smell. It's probably one of the worst smells I've ever smelled in my life. And so I asked my dad, I'm like, why does it smell like vinegar in our house? And he said that he actually sprayed it all over our houseplants because they were at risk of growing an infestation because there was a few bugs on it. And so as I was preparing for this episode, I was thinking about that example and I'm like, wow, that's how protective we should be over ourselves. And we should think about what are the healthy, professional, and God-honoring ways that we need to go about things in our life that can possibly rot us away. How can we go about this to cut it off in a respectful way and in a positive way? And so one of the third reasons why we know that it's time for an ending to come is when dead things are taking up space. If farmers don't prune the dead parts, it doesn't leave room for the healthy ones to spread to their full potential. And I love this example. Just even thinking about it, it makes so much sense. So what is no longer producing life and actually leading you to carry dead weight? Because if you can identify any dead branches, anything that is no longer serving a purpose, I encourage you to cut it off so that it leaves room for you to grow and to flourish. Even for myself, starting this podcast, there were habits in my life, there were things that I was doing that I needed to cut off so that I could have the time to prep, the time to prepare, the time to edit, the time to film, all of these things so that I could produce something fruitful God was leading me to do. And so these are just a few diagnostic criteria that we can reference when we want to know when it's time to end something. And even with these 3 points, it can still be hard depending on your life situation. And sometimes you don't have a clear distinction between like, oh yeah, this is rotten, so that I definitely need to cut it off. No, sometimes it's going to be a matter of I need to decide between good and what's best. And I think that's one of the reasons why we can find ourselves in turmoil over deciding when it's time to end something, because it's not necessarily that something is bad, toxic, or extremely negative. It's just something that's good, but there is something better that we can choose. We need to train our brain to recognize seasons as normal so that we don't get too comfortable in one season and prolong it for too long. And one way to do this is by increasing our psychological flexibility, which is actually a therapeutic approach commonly practiced in acceptance commitment therapy. If you ever are curious, a brief synopsis on how we can achieve psychological flexibility is really being aware of the present moment, being mindful about it, radically accepting it, and being willing to feel difficult emotions that come with the changing of seasons. And some things that you have to do is you have to step back from your thoughts, focus on the present, focus on connection, not comparison, live by your own values, build habits based on your values, or avoid lifestyles and behaviors that are contradicting your values. This is really how we allow our brain to have that flexibility to take on the challenges of life head on. And I have found that closing doors have definitely been one of the most painful ones for me so far, like one of the most painful events, which is why it's just so important to learn then how to do it well. Because if it's something that I can't avoid, that it's going to come, and sometimes it comes when we least expect it, then I at least want to have my mind trained to take it head on and to know and have the skills to cope with it all. So I'm just hoping that with this episode, I was able to provide you with some guidance and encourage you to take some mental notes on what signs to look for when it comes to ending things, what flags or what red flags we need to watch out for. But most importantly, I want you guys all to have hope, because God is working all things for our own good, as I said. And ultimately, He is the one that we need to seek after to know what steps to take. And endings are necessary. It's part of our personal life. It's part of our professional life. Afflictions can make us more effective. So we can look at endings as an opportunity to learn and to grow. And so, yeah, what better way to start off the year with the first episode talking about endings, because we are just entering into a new year, and I'm hoping you guys can apply this knowledge to your own life. With that, I will catch you guys on my next episode. Thank you so much for listening, and don't forget to rate and to like the show if you're watching it on YouTube.